Hey everyone, welcome back to URevitGUY. This is a compilation of all of our most popular videos all together in one sitting without all of the introductions and endings, so you can view them all at once. Hopefully this will be rewarding for you and enjoyable. Let us know in the comments if you like this and we'll post more. Thank you. Stair types. You have straight stair. Start looking at the straight stair run type first. I'm going to choose the assembled stair design. And again, the base level height is level 1 and top level height is level 2, which is a 10-foot floor-to-floor height requiring 18 risers currently with an 11-inch tread depth, and it's calculating a 6-inch and 171 by 256th of an inch for the riser height. Come over here to the floor plan. Left click to start here, and notice as you move your cursor, you can count the number of risers that are being created and how many are remaining, up to 18 currently. Left click to place that, and it says riser 1 through 18. Click the green check mark to finish still, and it creates that stair. From the base, starts with a full solid line work, and then at the cut line, it shows a cut mark, and also the lines above that are overhead dashed lines. Going to a 3D view, so that was creating a stair from one point to the next. Again, it creates a full three-dimensional stair design, including railings, stringers, treads, and risers. Continuing with that condition, start the stair tool again. All same conditions. Start a run of stairs going up to here, say 9 risers, and left click, and then move up and over slightly and left click again. Notice this creates a landing segment between those two automatically. As I move my cursor around, you can see how the landing preview is changing its orientation. It will continue to readjust that landing design as you move your cursor around. I'm going to just create it here, and left click to create the next segment. Click the green check mark to finish, and again that creates another run of stairs. In 3D you can see that's created a switchback stair design where the stairs go up, move over on the landing, and then go up to the final position. Stair tool again. Same conditions once more. Left click, move up 9 risers. Left click again, come over here and create another set of stairs going back in the opposite direction, creating a more switchback stair design. So it moves the stairs up, goes over, and then comes back to the same location instead of exiting on the opposite side. Once again, Revit does a lot of modeling work for you. Stair tool again. Next we'll switch to the full step spiral design. Left click to create a center point, and then the first radius I can create is a 2'6" design. Left click and it creates a full set of spiral stairs. Click the green check mark to finish and go to 3D, and that creates a completely three-dimensional circular stair design, one of my favorite types. Each of the treads are exactly segmented and cut in a wedged triangular shape at exactly the same design, and the center is a almost helical stringer support design, and the railing follows. In a lot of cases you'd probably transition this center support stringer to a pole and just have the outside railing, but again this design includes that, but you can replace it and change it out as needed for your design. But that's a lot of complex geometry that you don't have to create yourself. Revit does that for you. Stair tool again, then go into the center and spiral case. Once again, choose a center point and then an initial radius. I'll continue with 2'6". The difference here is you actually do place the risers as you're counting, and it's counted up to 14 risers currently with 4 remaining. And as I left click and I move over here with my cursor, it's going to create a landing between those two segments. Notice how far and complex I can create this landing. It can be at any distance and any length away from that position, to complete that stair design. So if I move it way up here and I left click and I create 4 more risers and left click again, this landing and bridge condition is all part of the same stair design, and it can create that for you. It's still up to you as the designer to make sure the underside head height works correctly for safety purposes, but Revit will create whatever you desire. So all of that design is created within the same singular tool. Taking a look at this stair first, I can select that stair and look at the Modify tab. I have an Edit Stair option. Edit that and it turns the design of the stair on, and I have the ability to select each run and length of landing. On the landing, select the landing condition. Again, you have to convert that separately to a sketched outline. And you're using boundary and stair path lines. As long as you use a boundary line and follow around the perimeter of the design, it will create whatever you need, as long as you follow the rules. If I trim those together, and then click Finish, I can make a highly volumetric area on that landing. Down at the base of the stair, convert that to a sketch again, edit sketch, and at the base I will create a bullnose design of riser lines with an arc shape. On the last tread, put a bullnose arc on both sides, and then pull the last boundary line back to the previous riser line. And then click the green check mark to finish, and that creates a bullnose design. And then click Finish. And when I tilt that up to look at it in 3D, you can see that the base of the stair has a bullnose stair design. It has pulled the stringer support back as well as the railing, and the landing has completely expanded out to be that full shape, and the railing will follow all of those design changes automatically. Going to the stair tool, component panel, choosing this Create Sketch option, and using boundary, riser, and stair path lines, you can generate the design of the stair that you're looking for. Creating riser lines, and using the pick line tool, I will pick the first leg, second leg, and then I actually run a length of riser line against the face of the wall, and then I create a boundary line that goes from the edge of this stair back to the wall, and make sure everything is trimmed together without any extra overlapping lines. Once that finishes, look at this in a 3D view, set the elevation height of this correct, coming up that full height, and creating a custom stair design, meeting up to that landing and reaching the door 1 foot higher. Okay, so I have this floor plan open. Modify Create Stair tab, component panel, choosing the straight stair run type. Looking at the properties type selector drop-down list, I'm going to choose the assembled stair type. In this case, it is called Hotel Stairs, and it has a base level of level 1 up to top level 2, and a desired height for that is 18 feet tall, which is the floor-to-floor height. And it says, based on the stair calculation of 7-inch maximum riser height, it's calculating it's needing 31 risers and a riser height of 6/31/32. And it also has a tread depth of 11 inches, starting at riser number 1. Choose the straight stair again. All of the same properties apply. I'm going to start in this lower left-hand corner and create my first run upstairs, 13'9", left click, and that creates 15 risers from 1 to 15 up to this point. Come over here to the right-hand side of this edge, and it creates a landing between those 2 points automatically, because I have this option on that says automatic landing created. When 2 stair runs are separated, it creates a landing between them automatically. And then run the rest of the stairs up to this amount it says 16 more risers and 0 remaining. Notice how the number is changing as I increase the length of the stairs. That is placing the number of risers at a time up to 31 risers total for 18 feet floor to floor height. Left click and it places that from riser 16 up to 31. Then go up to the Modify tab and choose the green check mark to finish, and that completes the stair creation. So notice in the floor plan that it creates the stairs fully and intact from the up location, showing where it would exist on the floor above. In dashed lines it shows an overhead condition, and then solid lines in the area below where the cut line exists on that floor level. Going into the level 2 location, you can see a tiny bit of railing poking out from this position. The blue area currently is where the floor exists. Right now, the floor is extending over the stair area, and we would want to cut that out. There are a couple of methods to do that. You can create a shaft opening. You can cut the floor boundary in the area where the stair exists, which is what we'll do next. Coming over to this floor plan, selecting the floor line, go to the Modify Floor tab, and choose Edit Boundary. Changing the sketch line so that the floor cuts across the face of the exit stairs here. Using boundary lines, I'll draw a straight line across here where it meets this position of the wall. Use the Trim and Extend a Corner tool and join those corners together. I also need to extend this line up the wall and then trim that as well. Once the sketch is completed, click the green check mark to finish, and the flooring is now cut back so that the stairs exist in that shaft opening. That would need to be done at each floor level, or you can use a shaft opening, as I mentioned before. Many ways to do the same task. Looking at this situation in a three-dimensional view, which I have created here, I have cut back the three-dimensional view so that I can only see the stair location, and I can see that the stair exits up here at the top of the floor, showing the stair coming from the second floor level down to the first landing, wrapping around this area and going back down to the floor and exiting. The railing itself is currently a picketed configuration. I can change that using the properties. I have a drop-down list where I can change it to different designs, and one of those designs needs to be a single handrail that is wall-mounted. I don't have one of those created, so I'm going to go to a rectangular handrail type, choose Edit Type, and duplicate this type design, labeling this as Handrail Wall Mount. In the Rail Structure panel, click on that, and it has no information in here because it's just a horizontal rail with pickets. Going to the baluster placement area, choose Edit, and at the top there is the regular baluster pattern. Using a 3/4 inch square baluster, we're going to remove that by changing it back to none, and the posts at the base are also going to be removed, so we set those baluster families to none as well. Once all of this is changed, click OK, and that turns it into a wall-mounted railing by itself. The center item is still a picketed rail. You can also exchange that and make it a guardrail condition. Again, this is a horizontal pipe design, and it has a larger, taller handrail, and then an inset handrail that follows around the perimeter. So railings interactive with stairs are very complex and can be customized in many different ways. In fact, I'll expand this top rail out, giving it an extension at the base and at the top. So it extends out and back, typically required by code. Do the same thing on the other side. Extension with a tread depth plus 12 inches, extending that out as well. Stairs are one of the most complex areas of the Revit software, but with some very minimal amounts of information, you can get highly complex data and three-dimensional modeling content automatically created for you within the Revit software. In this project, I'm going to go to the Architecture tab, Build panel, and choose the Architectural Wall tool, which opens up the Modify Place Wall tab, where you'll have a draw panel of various types of shapes that you can draw the wall with. The options bar opens up as well that says Modify Place Wall. You can place the wall at a depth below the current level or a height above the current level. You can set it up to a level that is defined in your building already, or you can set it to an unconnected height that you type in manually. I'm going to choose level 2 for the moment. The location line sets the justification point for the wall up to 6 different positions: wall center line, core center line, finished face exterior, finished face interior, core face exterior, core face interior. The chain option can be turned on or off, which defines the wall endpoint to endpoint with chain turned on, or with chain turned off, it requires a new start point each time you generate a new wall position. An offset distance can be set between each wall line segment that's created. Radius can be turned on and will automatically generate a radius corner at each vertex corner that's created, and the wall status can be set to allowed or disallowed for joining, starting with the straight line tool, coming down to the properties, type selector drop down list. These are all of the existing wall types inside of this current project. They are organized by description based on their typical use. We have soffit wall, retaining wall, interior wall type, generic wall types, foundation wall, and exterior wall type. We'll look at the construction of the wall type materials in a moment. The description of the wall type is merely just a notification of what the wall is typically used for in the condition. You can label the wall type anything that you wish. I'm going to start with the generic wall type 8-inch style. The location line will be set to wall center line. Set the height of the wall at floor 1, base offset of 0 feet. That sets the base of the wall. The top of the wall will be set up to the level 2 with a top offset of also 0 feet. Placing a segment of wall here and zooming in closely, I can click on that wall and you can see a blue node showing the center line of the wall. That is indicating the location line or justification point of that wall where it's currently located. Coming up to the Architecture tab, Work Plane panel, I will place a reference plane line. This is going to simulate a reference plane of where the wall is currently located, and when something changes, you can see the difference of where that changes. Clicking on the wall itself, go to the Properties drop-down list, and changing it to a different wall type will expand the wall out on both sides from the center point of the wall, from the center line, equally and proportionally on both sides. Changing that to a 6-inch size will reduce that into the wall cavity of where the 8-inch wall used to be. As you can see, the square footage on the space on both sides of this wall will grow or shrink as the wall thickness changes. It will be important to understand where the wall thickness changes and where the square footage will increase or decrease on either side of the wall, because it will impact your square footage of room spaces inside of the building. Changing back to an 8-inch wall type sets it back to a full thickness, then changing the location line to finished face exterior. That changes the blue node to the right-hand side of the wall. That indicates that this side of the wall is the exterior side. That's important to understand. Now when I change the thickness of the wall to 12 inches, it will grow only to the left-hand side, where the right-hand side maintains its flush location on that side of the wall. If this was an exterior wall, then you would make sure the exterior of the building is facing this direction, where the interior side of the wall will grow or shrink with the wall thickness change. Once again, changing it back to 6 inches reduces it into the same cavity, reducing the square footage of the wall that's being taken up, increasing the square footage of the space behind it. The right side of the wall maintains its flush location. Repeat that same process on the interior side. Next, we will change to an exterior wall type that has more layers of material inside of it with a much greater thickness attached to it. Changing the reference plane to the far right hand side of this wall. Repeat that same step again. Once again, the interior face of the wall is set here on the left hand side. We will look at the materials in a moment. Changing the thickness of the wall will grow or shrink it from that justification point. Finished face exterior, growing or shrinking from that face as well, maintaining its justification. and maintaining its flush position on that side of the wall. If you notice that the wall is backwards or inverted from where the exterior and interior face should be, clicking on the wall towards the middle of the wall at the midpoint on one side will be this flip tool that says change wall's orientation. Clicking on that will change the wall's orientation from interior to exterior side, flipping it on its justification line. You can use the space bar to flip the same thing. Notice that it flips it completely outside of the cavity or envelope of where the wall is currently, depending on where the justification or location line is set to. If you're going to flip the wall because it was drawn in the wrong orientation, make sure that you set the location line, typically back to wall center line, so that when you hit the space bar once to flip the wall, now the exterior side is on the left hand face, the right hand side is the interior face, but the wall has not moved outside of the space of the cavity where the wall currently is located. Very important to note where that square footage will increase or decrease. Selecting the wall, go to the Properties menu and choose Edit Type Property. This opens a dialog box for editing the type properties of the wall. This is called Exterior Brick on CMU. You can rename that to anything that you wish, making any description changes that you want. If you're going to edit this wall's condition and this wall type is already being used in the model in some locations, any changes that you make to this wall type will affect every version of the wall in the entire project. Be very careful not to affect anything in the model unexpectedly. Most often, you will want to choose to duplicate this wall type by choosing Duplicate, giving it a new name, giving it whatever description that you want. Let's say 2-layer interior gyp. Hit Enter, and that creates a new wall type with a completely different name. Now that I have a new type design, it's not going to affect the existing style. There are some properties in the drop-down list, including manufacturer information, that will include good data that will be important inside of the properties of the building, of the project itself. The most important aspect of the wall is the structure and the construction of that wall itself. Click Edit in this dialog box, which opens the Edit Assembly dialog box within the Wall tool. At the top, you can see where it says the family type is a basic wall condition. The type name is listed here. Again, the name that we just chose. The total thickness is listed here as well, which are all of the materials built up together below with the added thicknesses added together. The resistance or R value is determined by the material's thermal coefficient, and there's also a thermal massing condition, which is also derived from the material's information as well. The materials in the Revit software can hold physical, structural, and thermal resistance characteristic, and those pieces of data will incorporate themselves into the energy analysis within the software. Coming down below, in the very lower left-hand corner, you can choose a preview option. Expanding that will open up the dialog box to show the preview of the wall construction in either a plan view or in a section view orientation. Clicking on the wall's construction materials on the right hand side, you can see that the top of the list is the exterior side of the wall, bottom of the list is the interior side of the wall. This is how Revit understands the difference between exterior and interior side of the wall and where these materials fall in between. Looking at the list of materials, it starts with a finished layer of common brick material of 3 5/8 inch thickness, then an air gap layer of 3 inches thickness, typically required by construction code, then another thermal rigid insulation layer of 3 inches, also required by code. Then there is a membrane layer of damp proofing of 0 thickness. So even though this material doesn't have a specific thickness applied to it, typically a sheet good or a paper good with a very thin material, maybe 1/8 of an inch, it would be listed as a 0 thickness because it's very minimal. And even though this material doesn't have a applied thickness attached to it within the wall's construction, it will still be helpful to include that because of 2 reasons. The material takeoff that Revit can establish for you, this material could be included in that material takeoff, so that it would want to be included for that purchasing order in that list of material. Also, Revit has the capability of running an energy analysis, and with that material included in the wall's construction, it will benefit the wall's analysis with that material intact. So you would want to include any materials that are part of the wall's construction in total. Next is layers 5 and 7, which are the core boundary areas. This is typically where the structural material of the wall will exist. So notice that this layer's function is a structural layer. It is a masonry concrete unit, or a CMU, of 7 5/8 inch thick, typically an 8-inch CMU block. Notice this also has a structural material with a checkbox next to it listing that as the structural material layer. You can only have one defined structural material layer inside of the wall's construction. and it must exist within that core boundary area. And even if there are only one layer of material in the wall itself, it must exist within the core boundary area. After that is a substrate layer of metal furring strip of 1 5/8 inch thickness, and another finished layer of gypsum wallboard of 5/8 inch thickness on the interior side of the wall. All of these materials and thicknesses added up together will indicate the total thickness of the wall's construction above. You can use these materials and insert new layers of material, delete existing layers of material, and move layers of material up and down the list. So if I select this gypsum board material, I can move it up the list of materials all the way to the exterior side of the wall, where it's now outside of the brick. Not a very good construction process, but Revit lets you do whatever you want to. I'm going to move it back down the list to the interior face of the wall and insert a new layer of material. This list of materials can be set to different function types for structure, substrate, thermal air layer, finish 1 and 2, and membrane layer. A couple of definitions with these function types. The membrane layer is the only type of layered material that can have a 0 thickness attached to it. Otherwise, it must require a thickness of some distance. There's also a finish 1 and 2 layer. The reasons for this are that finish 1 and finish 2 must be sequentially placed. There cannot be finish 1 next to finish 1 or finish 2 next to finish 2. So you must follow them in sequential order. The middle section is the material. Clicking on this, click this ... square, which opens up the Revit Materials library. This is a list of all of the materials currently loaded in the Revit project. This is a very long list of materials. These are all the materials that are loaded, but not necessarily used inside of the Revit project currently. This comes from the template file or the project that you started with, and any material can be chosen to be added to this wall's construction. It could include water, glass, copper, wood, steel, concrete. Whatever materials that you want to use can be defined within the Revit software. You can search for a list of materials at the top, so I'll search for, say, concrete, and I have a list of cast in place concrete, precast concrete, concrete masonry units, lightweight concrete. You can also see another list of materials below: ceramic tile, sand, lime, brick, lightweight CMU. This is a list of what are called AEC materials. This list of materials is a library that gets installed within the Revit software, and this library of materials can be loaded into a project when desired. This list of AEC materials is locked in place, meaning that when you select these materials, the properties for those materials are grayed out and cannot be modified or adjusted. That means that this list of materials are intact and are always pristine to be able to load into future projects, and you know that they have not been modified. For instance, if I wanted to load this ceramic tile material, I have to go to that material and choose this up arrow that says Add Material to Document, and then it loads that material to the list above, where I could now modify the material based on this information, including its identity data, where I can modify the material's name, its physical description, the classification of that material, which can be adjusted as well, any information that you want to include for manufacturer, model number, unit cost for the material, a URL website that can include a specification for that material. All of that is good data and information that you would want to include into a project. The Graphics tab controls the graphics of that material itself, of how it's defined in the project. You could change things like the color, its layer of transparency, a surface pattern, which is a hatch pattern that you can include. Also, a cut pattern, which would be used for a section cut, and how the material will look at during a sectioning cut. So you can start to determine what the material will look like in different conditions. So you can create as many materials in the project as you want. The Appearance tab is solely controlling the rendering appearance of the material for the rendering of that project. Revit has a fairly good rendering engine, and you could use that with any materials that you want to and defining them specifically. There is a physical and a thermal layer as well. This information comes with that material and can be modified but I would recommend working directly with the manufacturer before modifying any of these characteristics, because it could adjust the output of your energy and structural analyses. I'm going to choose another gypsum board layer inside of the wall's construction, setting the material to also 5/8 of an inch thickness. Adds another layer of gypsum board to the interior face of the wall. This could be used for smoke penetration, sound barrier, what other types of construction that you need to for this wall can be established. You can create as many wall types in the project as you want. Each one of them must be a completely different wall type by name, even if it's a minuscule modification of maybe the air gap is a 1/8 of an inch thicker in one material than the other. It would require a whole new wall type to be defined. Click OK. And now I've modified this new wall type. Click OK again, and it now has 2 layers of gypsum board on the interior face of the wall. Now that we have an understanding of how the wall's construction is defined, let's start by adding some wall layers to this building. Coming into the wall tool, using the properties drop-down list, choosing this wall type here. Again, you can set the location line of the wall specifically. I will choose finished face interior. The wall height will be up to parapet in this building. Choosing from this corner using grips and snaps. If you have an AutoCAD file as an underlay, it really helps to define the outline of the building, especially if you're working on an existing renovation. That will set the exterior material of the wall's construction. You also have interior walls that can be created. You have a list of interior wall here. I'm going to use a 4 7/8 inch wall condition, edit type properties, edit structure, and this is built up of gypsum wallboard of 5/8 of an inch on both sides of the wall, and a metal stud layer of 3 5/8 inch thickness for the structural layer. A typical construction for commercial usage. You can use wood timber, you can use gypsum board, plaster, wood paneling, completely up to your design needs. The join status of the wall can be set to allowed or disallowed. When you are placing walls up against each other, they will typically join together, where the materials themselves will intersect each other and continuously wrap around each corner, where the gypsum board will wrap at each corner and the interior metal stud will extend and connect into the space of where each exist. Revit deals more with a massing of materials other than actual individual metal studs that are being placed within the cavity. It treats this entire material layer as just a mass surface of material, and it will not define each individual stud for you. Revit does not have that capability at the moment. It may include that in the future, but it's not there yet. The other option is when you're placing walls to disallow join. When you join 2 materials of wall together, it will stop that intersection and just butt up that wall condition next to the other wall adjacent to it. If you need to change that condition, there is an option clicking on that wall. There is a tiny symbol here that says allow join. Once you click on that, it will now intersect that wall and allow the materials to join together. If you want to disconnect those, you can click on this wall, right click on the end point of this wall here and choose disallow join, which does disconnect those, but they're still intersecting. I would want to select the grip and then pull that back to the edge. Now the wall would not intersect the others. You could use that condition if this was a existing wall with a new construction wall building up to it, or if this was a temporary wall with a new construction wall and you don't want them to intersect, or for any other purposes that you may have. Different wall heights are also available and included. Let's look at all of this construction inside of a 3D view. The complete 3-dimensional model is defined here And usually, when you're placing walls, they will create themselves as a three-dimensional object. These walls going all the way up to the top of the building, set up to the parapet height, I can actually click on this wall and it has a grip on top of the wall's condition where I can raise the wall height, which will increase its height only within that wall segment. I can select the wall and drop it down lower. What I'm actually changing here is looking at the properties of the wall. It has a top constraint of parapet level, and I'm changing a top offset distance with this option. I can change these numbers manually, so if I change that to -10 feet, it raises that wall height back up to this condition. If I say it is +10 feet, it raises it up above that as well. You can completely adjust each individual wall type, one at a time, with those properties, from the base or the top. Raising the wall off the floor, or dropping it down below the floor. You will typically have more wall locations inside of an entire project than most other items because of all of the different wall facets, smaller segments of wall, and different wall conditions. One aspect I love about Revit is the capability to just modify a property and change its type entirely. So selecting this interior wall, using the properties drop-down list, I can change it to any other wall type that I want with just one modification. Changing its size, changing its condition, without having to delete and replace the wall entirely. If this were to be a plumbing wall on the back of this restroom area, then you could just modify the wall type and adjust it immediately. Taking this wall and isolating it by itself for the moment, I can see different materials and conditions of this wall's construction. I can also select this wall and convert it to a parts option. I can select this wall, go to the Modify tab, and turn it into a parts option, where I have the capacity to see each individual layer even in the 3D view. All those layers of material are stripped away and you can define each one of those individually. You can actually label them as well individually. As you can see, with all these different layers of materials, you can actually strip them away, pull them apart from each other, so you can clearly see how the wall is made up in a 3D view, which is a lot more descriptive than just the two-dimensional representation. Each material can be found and labeled by its name, and if the material changes, the label will update automatically. Looking at this project, we have an existing building with some new construction content and also different phases included. You have existing, demolition, temporary content, and new construction. All of this information can occur within actually two different phases between existing and new construction, and different modifications between those different phases. Each view has the ability to have, in the properties window, a phasing section, and the phase is set to either new construction currently or with the drop-down list to existing. When existing is displayed, it shows only existing content as existing to remain and demolition content. So you can see that both of those look exactly the same, as well as the rest of the building. Changing the phase option from existing to new construction changes to a future state where you see all of the other phases included: existing, demolition, temporary, and new construction. Whichever phase the view is set for will be automatically chosen when new content is created. So choosing the wall tool, creating an exterior wall section, bringing that over here, will generate an existing exterior wall. Again, every object has the ability to have a phasing type set for it. Looking at this wall, the properties says phase created is existing. Phase demolished equals none. We'll get into that in a moment. I can add interior walls. Doors and windows. Rooms. All of this information now shows as an existing building. So this would be as if you were walking up to a project before any modification was started for this building's modification. You must bring in all of the existing content that is going to be adjusted and modified and utilized or interfaced with from the project inside of your Revit software. It has to exist in the existing condition for the phasing to take place. Now, in this view, I will change the properties of the view from existing to new construction. Notice how the view options change so that the existing content has a grayed out tone and the outline of the objects are bluish color. Now, when I add new content, it's going to show as a new construction visual style. I can select interior wall types. Maybe there is a new demising wall that is coming across the building shown here. As I zoom in, you can see that that has a dark black outline for this wall, which is different than the existing wall. When I add a door or other objects, it automatically makes a modification to the building where it creates a new door inside of this existing wall. The red part here is actually a demolished portion of that existing wall. Revit is smart enough to understand that if you are placing a new door inside of an existing wall, it must be demoed in that section for the new door to be placed. So that existing information, adding it as a demoed section, is already a phase change. Adding windows calls the same option. You are creating a punched opening inside of an existing space, and it knows that a demolished area is required. Any new doors or windows that I add into the new construction wall will show as normal, because that door is adding itself into a wall that has not been placed yet. Going to the Modify tab, Geometry panel, there is a tool in the lower right hand corner called the Demolish tool. It looks like a hammer, which is kind of a joke. I think that's funny. Click on the Demolish hammer, and any object that you click on from the existing area will be automatically added as a demolished content. When I click on this wall, Notice that the door is automatically included in the demolished section because doors and windows and other wall-hosted objects are all part of the same object for the wall. So if the wall is being demolished, the door must be demolished unless you change it to be different, but the wall being removed will automatically remove the door as well because it's part of the same object hosted into the wall's content. What you're actually doing when you're making these modifications is when I select this object for the wall, scroll down and look at the properties, it says phase created is existing, phase demolished is new construction. Each of these options can actually be changed, so I can actually create this new existing wall as a new construction wall, and it changes to a blue wall type, which is temporary. Change that back to existing, and it's existing to be demolished. The other option is phase demolished, which is set to new construction. Setting it to none means that this wall is not being demolished from existing, and it's meaning that it's existing to remain. When I change that to demolished in the new construction phase, that means that within the new construction, this wall will be part of the demolition. Using that hammer tool, it automatically tells that wall to turn on this option for phase demolished equals new construction. Basically, if you have multiple phases after existing, it will demolish the object in the next phase following it. You can create multiple phases other than just existing in new construction. That is just by default. Coming over to this section, if I wanted to create another wall as an interior partition, maybe we're going to wall off this area of the building as we are working on this section of the building, but this is a wall that is only going to be constructed temporarily during the construction phase. This can be set to a temporary wall condition. If I look at the properties of the wall, it says that phase was created in new construction and the phase demolished is currently none. But if I change that to also being demolished in the new construction phase, that becomes a temporary wall condition. It's created in new construction and demolished within the new construction before the project is completed. That automatically means that this wall is a temporary wall, meant only during the construction phase to exist, and then it's removed after the construction phase is ended. Then I can come in here and say that this wall and this wall are going to be changed to be demolished in the new construction phase. And again, the same option occurs where the graphics change, causing that wall to become red and the door to be demolished as well. If I select this door and demolish in the new construction phase, you'll see something else new that happens. This door becomes a demolished door, but Revit also understands that an existing wall with a door being demolished will leave a hole, and you need to fill that hole with something, and it's actually adding a new construction portion of the existing surrounding wall type into this segment. So it does that automatically. Different from the option where creating a new door inside of an existing wall type will add a demolished wall portion. This demolished door adds a new construction portion of the existing wall type. So I'll place a new door next to that, maybe down here. So even if you are taking this door, removing it from this portion of the wall and moving that same door down here and inserting the existing door into this wall, all of this content still has to occur. You are moving the door from this portion to this portion. You are opening this door area up that has to be filled with a new construction wall. You are cutting a hole in the existing wall, demolishing a portion of the existing wall to add the new door in that location. So all of that is included in the phasing process of the Revit software. Going to the Manage tab, Phasing panel, choose Phases. This opens the Phasing dialog box. In here, you can create as many different phases in the project as you want to. Currently, you have existing and new construction. This information comes default in most template files where you have existing and new construction phases set. You can also insert new phases before or after the selected phase. So for instance, if between existing and new construction, I want to add some phases before, it creates phases 1 through 4. You can label those however you want. Again, labeling these are really just descriptions. They can be whatever you want to, and you can add descriptions next to that to spell out more specifically what that phase would include. However, I can share with you the more phases that you add to the Revit project, it's going to make the phasing process more complex and complicated, because each phase is responsible for an adjustment in the objects themselves, and as you make modifications to creation and demolition, the demolished content must be created in one of the existing phases or one of the phases in the project, and it must be created within one of those phases. If it's in different phases, it may get confusing on where it's located, how the phasing and the process of the project is generated. If you have specific phases in the building's construction that makes sense to use multiple phases, go ahead and use that. But if it is a base project that you're working on and it's going to be completed in one condition, using the new construction and existing phase makes the most sense. Only using multiple phases when it is required. If you add more phases than you need, you can remove those phases by choosing Combine With. Notice there is no option to delete. That means that any information that is on any of these phases already will automatically be combined with whichever phase you choose. So if you say combine with previous or combine with next, combine with next means that this phase combined with next automatically gets included in new construction phase. So any content that is created within that phase automatically gets applied to that other phase that you're establishing. And yeah, I'm going to continue to do this to remove all the other phases that I just added. Going to the next tab, Phase Filters, we'll look at this in a moment of how this applies to the view. It looks very complex, but it's actually fairly simple after you read the description. The graphics of the phase can be set as well. In here you have existing, demolished, new construction, and temporary. These are actually graphics that you can establish for each phase of the view. So notice that existing has a light blue projection line and a dark blue thick line in the cut line. It also has a fill pattern of a light gray color. That is why the existing material shows as a light gray color down here. Demolished shows as a dashed red line, a thicker dashed red line in the cut pattern, and a diagonal red hatch pattern. New construction is currently a solid green color. Temporary is a blue color with a dashed line and a thicker dashed line under the cut pattern. That is how these colors are established between the red and blue and gray coloring for the phasing sections based on this dialog box. This is applied for the entire project. Any phases that you establish in your project are completely global within that project. You cannot have certain phases for each view. They are all encompassing throughout the entire project. Coming back to this view, I will now look at the phase filtering options. The phase must be set to the later phase type. If you establish this under existing, notice how everything returns back to its previous position, where only the existing content is shown. The view must be set to the new construction so that all of the future phases are displayed. In the phase filter drop-down list, you have a number of options. Again, this looks confusing, but it actually does make sense. When it says show none, it shows no graphical modifications for any of the phase settings. All of the coloring of the view looks exactly as it would for the new construction completed project. For the coloring to make more sense, you can use the drop-down list and choose show all. That's where you get the coloring between demolished, temporary, existing, and new construction. Show complete means that the project is completed entirely. It removes any graphics changes from existing to remain and new construction, and it's as if the project is complete and you walked on the site, and that is how the project looks at the moment. Show demo plus new. This will only show demolished content, temporary content, and new construction content. Notice that the existing to remain is disabled. New content is only new construction content without any temporary or demolished content. New plus demo, existing to remain, demolished content, new construction. The only thing missing is temporary content. New and demo. New and temporary content. It shows new construction and temporary content only. Previous and demo is your existing to remain and your demolished content. This is your demo. Previous and new construction, it shows existing to remain and new construction in its graphical changes. Includes the temporary content. Show previous phase shows only existing to remain without any of the graphics applied to the other types. Let's go back to the Manage tab, Phasing panel, and choose Phases. Under the Phase filter, all of those different options that we just looked at are in this list. Under Filter Name, you can create new versions of these, you can delete existing ones, you can have as many of these phase filters as you want. The filter name is merely a description on how that filter applies and what it is showing. Options over here are going to be part of the list for as many phases that are added. If there are more phases created in the project other than existing and new construction, those will also show up here in a list of more options to the right. Each one of these options can be set to by category, overridden, or not displayed. By category means that it will show exactly as the Revit view is set for that object. Overridden will take you to this dialog box for graphic overrides, and it will apply any of the changes that are set for these objects. Not displayed means that it's turned off or hidden in that view type. So if we look at something like demo and new construction, this means that new construction is by category, existing is overridden, demolished is overridden with the graphics, and temporary is not displayed, so it means it's turned off. Your demo plan, new construction is not displayed, existing is overridden, demolished is overridden, and temporary is not displayed. With this dialog box, you can set any of the view properties that you want to for each filter type, defining any phasing set that you want. Rooms within the phasing conditions are frustrating to use, I will tell you that. Rooms can only exist in one phase of the project. They will not transition to new phases of the project. It actually does make sense of why that occurs, because if this room exists here, combined and surrounded by this wall location, if there's another wall outside of that, how does Revit know where this room ends and starts between each phase? So the way this works is that Revit requires different rooms to be created in each phase type. One way that I like to do this is I will take a copy of the rooms that already exist, selecting all of those rooms, go to the Modify tab, copy to clipboard, and then I will go to the next phase. I will change the view from existing to new construction phase. Again, all of that content is still here, but there are no rooms in this area. The rooms only exist, or are only occurring in the existing phase. I'm going to come back to the Modification tab and choose Paste to Same Place, and this updates the information. Now the rooms themselves are automatically confused because some of this information is coming from different phases of the project. Tagging these rooms, it does does show the same naming convention, but if I look at the properties of this room, it says phasing, and the phase is new construction, and it is grayed out. Rooms are possibly one of the only objects that does not have the option to change its phase. It must be created in the phase that it's currently in, and it cannot be modified. Notice that it's ignoring this temporary wall and the existing wall, only bounding itself to the new construction wall type. It's only bounding itself to the new construction wall type. So it actually ignores any existing to remain content, even though the room bounding option is turned on for it. But that does give you the option to create a brand new roomscape for all of your modifications for the redesign of the project. So that it's absolutely something to contend with when you're using phasing in the project. I will turn off rooms as the category for a moment to be less distracting right now. Then I'm going to move down here to this portion of the building. Change the view filter back to show all. Once again, you have differences in the view types for demolished, existing to remain, temporary, and new construction. Going to a 3D view, you can actually see all of that information as well inside of the 3D view. Notice that the hatching is applied to the objects themselves, and based on the view properties, the temporary wall and demolished wall are shown as transparent, so I can actually see through them. You can create as many objects within each phase as you want. Every object has a phasing set established for it, and the project can have a life cycle from start to finish and any state of change in between. I will open up the Collaborate tab. Under Manage Collaboration panel, you have Collaborate and Work Set. Work sets are a bucket or a location where everything in your model can be placed in a certain work set position that can be named and labeled specifically. It works very similar to layers in AutoCAD, but you would not have as many layers in Revit for work sets as you would in layers in AutoCAD. Too many work sets can be confusing and harder to work with. Additionally, you can only use work sets once you have collaboration turned on. So if you turn work sets on or enable them, it automatically enables collaboration as well. And once you save your file after that, it automatically becomes a central model file. So in here, I will go to the Manage Collaboration tab and turn Collaborate on, which opens up this dialog box where it asks you if you want to collaborate within your own local network or within the cloud. Collaborating cloud means that you'll be using the BIM 360 or the Autodesk Cloud Service. Within your own network means that you'll be creating a local central file on your local server where everyone on your team can access, but everyone on the team must have local network access at the same time. So choosing within network, click OK. It will go through a process of now turning on collaboration inside of this file. And the only difference that you can tell is that it now says Collaborating Cloud instead of just Collaborate, because that will let you switch to collaborating in the cloud after turning on the central file collaboration. And work sets are now enabled, where it automatically places everything on work set 1 in the project, and only levels and grids have been placed on the shared levels and grids work set. So both of these are automatically created. Everything else has been placed on work set 1 automatically. This is very similar to layer 0 in AutoCAD, where you have everything placed on the same work set, and we'll go through a process of separating everything into specific work sets that make sense. From here, once I have the work set dialog box open, I'm going to create new work sets by choosing new and creating logical work sets for placing content on, such as exterior content for the building, interior content, building core content, which could be stairs and elevators, any vertical penetrations. You'll also notice there's an option that says visible in all views. This automatically allows all the content on those work sets to be displayed in every view by default. You can uncheck this option and then label this with certain content being displayed in each view, and you can manually turn that content on through each view in the work set. Create a furniture work set that is not visible in all views by default. So with these created, clicking OK, it will ask you if you want to create furniture work set as the active work set because it was the last one created. Similar to layers, this is the same thing as your current layer. So the current work set means that anything you create will automatically be added to that work set. I'm going to say no for right now, and under active work sets it says work set 1, and I have a drop down list that shows you all of the work sets that were just created. At this time though, I still have a central file created and I have the central file open. I have not saved it since I turned collaboration on. I will do that now. Going to the File tab, Save As option, and choose Cloud Model. Save current Revit Revit project. That appears when you have collaboration turned on as well. I'm going to now go to my main C drive under a folder called My Company Project, and I like to save this project file under a subfolder called BIM or Revit Content. Anything that is separating it from all of the project documentation and contract, placing it under here. I'm also going to label this Architectural Project -Central, and before saving this, go to the Options button, select that, and you'll notice where it says make this a central model after save, which has a checkbox next to it and it's grayed out. This means that you cannot turn this option off, and it will automatically turn this file into a central model after saving. So once you turn collaboration on and you save the file, the only choice is to make it a central model file. Click OK, click Save again, and it has now saved the project as a central model file. Again, it looks like nothing has really changed, but at this time, I now have the central model file open, and that is not a good practice because anyone working on this project cannot synchronize to this central file if someone has it open. So you want to immediately close this file and then go back into the save location where that's been created. And when you click on that file, you'll see a preview of it on the right-hand side. It will say the file name down below, and where it says work sharing, you'll see the option where it says create new local with a checkbox and detach from central. These two options inform you that this file has been created as a central file, correct? And when you are creating or opening a file from the central model, you always want to choose create new local with a checkbox. This allows you to download a copy of the central file to your own local computer, and this local file is connected to the central file so that you can synchronize and collaborate your work to all other members of your team, and everyone will have a local copy of the project and be synchronizing with the central file over and over again, where you will download their content, upload your content, and they can download your. So that is a seamless process that is used to collaborate within the Revit software. The other option is called detach from central. This is an option that you can choose if you want to open this file but not have it connected to the central file anymore. This is used for temporary content. If you want to just look in the file, if you are not planning to work on the file actively, you can use this to completely disconnect yourself from the central file. Maybe you're working on something that is a sample or testing something out as designed, and it's not going to be part of the main file. So there's a couple of reasons that you might want to do that, but typically you will create new local each time you open the file each day. So when I choose open, it will create a downloaded copy of that file, and a underscore appended username is added to the end of the file name. So now when I go to the Collaborate tab, Synchronize panel, Synchronize with Central drop-down list, and choose Synchronize and Modify Set. Click on this option. This is where you'll synchronize all of the work that you created with the central file that was just added. The central file name is listed up here top, telling you where it's located, and down the bottom you have an option that says after synchronizing, relinquish the following work sets and elements. In this dialog box, I highly recommend you select every checkbox that's available each time that you synchronize your file. At this time, I only have user created work sets able to be checked because I just added work sets to the project and have not saved them or synchronized them to the central file. With each synchronization that you make, you can add comments to this list. It is not a requirement by Revit, but your company might have some sort of guidelines or requirements for you to add something here. Or you can add them on occasion when you know that there was a big change that was added at that time. So I can say work sets enabled, and this will be tracked and added to a list of historical information that you can review within the central file as well. At the bottom it says save local file before and after synchronization with central. This is a good idea to check because it will save the file first to the local computer, which you will continue to save your file locally before synchronizing often. It will save that file on your local machine first, then synchronize with the central file, uploading your content and relinquishing any of the content that you are using, and then downloading any of the content from the central file that other members of your team have implemented, and you'll now have an updated copy from the central file. Then it will save that file locally again after that synchronization has been done. This is a good practice for a couple of reasons. If your Revit happens to crash during or right after that synchronization takes place, you will now have a local copy of that file synchronized completely and updated, so you don't lose any connected work or connection to that central file just because your computer lost connection or it crashed or lost computer power for some reason. Just a good backup practice for that. Click OK. It will go through a process of synchronizing to the central file all the changes that were made. When I go back to synchronize with central, that checkbox is now unavailable because I don't have anything remaining still to be synchronized or relinquished. Now, if I go to this project, after it has been turned into a central file and I have collaboration turned on, I can now utilize my content with my other members of my team. Using the view control bar, 1, 2, 3 icons from the right is an option called Work Share Display Options. Click that and I have choices for checkout status, ownership, model updates, and work sets. When I click on owners, it turns on a orange surrounded perimeter with owners in the name. And if I come down here and I can select this chair and change it to a different chair type, it's hard to tell, but this is now a purplish color instead of the gray color of the other content. So that color indicates that my user now owns that chair because I modified it. And if your user owns that content by modifying it or manipulating it, no one else can adjust or touch that chair until I've let it go with the central file. I can also select an individual element, such as this wall, right-click on it, and choose to make elements editable. That tells the server that I am now using that wall, even though I haven't modified it yet. I want to use it or own it so that no one else can use it at this time. So it's kind of like checking out the content before you're using it, or you can initially just modify the content, and as long as no one else is using it, it will automatically add itself to your name. So now that I've changed that wall type, it is now the purple color, which is now listed under my name. You can continue that process indefinitely, and as long as no one else is using that content currently, you can check that content out or edit the information. At any time, you can also hover over the object. It will tell you what object it is, what work set it's on, and the current user that owns that item. Another task that needs to take place is currently all of the objects are on a single work set for work set 1. In the work sharing display options, there's a drop-down list and choose work sets. This will show all of the content currently on work set 1 with this purplish color. I now want to go through a process of transferring everything from work set 1 onto the specific work set established for it. To do that, I'm going to go to Visibility Graphic. Once you have work sets enabled, you have a new tab called Work Sets. Once I click on that, I have all the work sets listed here, and each one has an option that lets you show, hide, or use global settings. For each of these except work set 1, I will change them to be hidden so that as I move things from work set 1 to a different work set, it will hide them in the view, and I'm going through a process where everything will then be invisible once I've placed everything off of work set 1 onto a specific work set. Click OK, and then go through a process of transferring everything to the correct work set. To do this, you'll select a group of content, go to the Properties window where it says Work Sets Property, choose work set 1 drop-down list and change it to a specific work set like exterior. It now makes that invisible because I've hidden that in the view, and you'll go through a process of continuing that around the rest of the building. If there are objects that you cannot change by properties, make sure you filter those elements out. Perhaps curtain wall grid lines is the offending issue. Maybe curtain panels. And then push those on the correct work set as well. I'll continue that process until everything is removed from the view. Now that everything has been disabled in the view visibly, that means everything is not on work set 1 any longer, and work set 1 is now empty of content. Work set 1 is also required to exist, very similar to, again, layer 0, but you don't have to have anything placed on it for it to exist. Then I'll go back to Visibility Graphics, choose the Work Sets dialog box again, and I will enable all of the hidden workset views to use global settings. And everything will now be displayed again. Notice that content are now placed on colored elements to indicate each workset because they've been placed on the correct workset environments. In the active workset drop-down list, you can switch to a specific workset type. So now I can switch to furniture, and anything I add now will automatically be created in the furniture workset. So once I add something at this time, it will automatically be added to that workset. And when I click on the content, it tells you it's workset here, and you can always switch them from the drop-down list. In the Collaborate tab, Manage Collaboration panel, next to worksets you have gray inactive worksets. Selecting that will disable all of the other worksets from being vibrantly colored in a dark graphic, and it will gray everything else so it looks less intense, indicating that you're on a different workset than the others that are selectable. You can still manipulate content, but they are grayed out because you're not on that active workset. When you switch to different worksets, it will highlight that information with a darker color. I recommend using this option because it indicates which workset you're actively working in at all times, and that will help you to understand where you're working currently, so you don't place things in the wrong workset accidentally and have to change it later. Now, any of the content that I've just modified, my user still owns that information, so I have to go back to Collaborate. Under the Synchronize panel, choose Synchronize and Modify with Central. Choose Synchronize and Modify Settings. I highly recommend that you use this option to synchronize and modify settings each time that you synchronize, so that you see this dialog box allowing you to check any of the boxes that are available, to synchronize and then relinquish all of the ownership content that you have, so that anyone needing to use the information is always available to use that content without asking someone to release that content or to let it go, or to wait for someone to let go of that content if they're using it. And if you are holding onto that content and not using it, it's going to hold other members of your team up that want to use that content, where they now have to ask questions for who is using that content or can you let it go. It will help to streamline the process to be more efficient. So now I can say OK. It goes through the process of synchronizing all of that content to the central file, and I can move on with the rest of the project. I have now turned on two sets of the Revit software with the same file opened under the same username, unfortunately, to demonstrate how work sharing can look within the central model file and using content over the network. So for instance, if I zoom in closer into, say, this upper left-hand corner, when I have the ownership work sharing display enabled, when I select this wall, right-click and say Make Elements Editable, it will make this purple, and also it will update the other model file as well. So this is an indication that when you're working in the live Revit collaboration file, any users that own this content, the server will update the file immediately to show other people where the content is being utilized. So that is an indication to other users that no one else can use this wall and make modifications to it until that user relinquishes that information. And if you need to know who's using it, you can always hover over that and it'll tell you the current owner. And as long as that owner is holding onto that content, no one else can manipulate it. You can also contact that person and ask them if they are still using the content and can relinquish it or let it go, so that you can then work on it, so that some sort of communication is still required working within collaboration in the software. It's a good practice to at least talk to each other throughout the whole team to understand the needs of other users, so that if you are holding on to something, either accidentally or that you're planning to work on it later, that you're using it right now, but you are not using it or updating it at the moment, you can then relinquish that content, giving the other person ownership, allowing them to work on it, and then you can take ownership of it again later. So it helps to keep everything streamlined by allowing all members to utilize the correct content at any time. Additionally, if I select content, such as this wall, and I make a change to it, such as modifying the wall type, my user now owns this wall, and my user now owns this wall over here, but you can see that they are different. So this file is not the same as this file any longer because they're two separate files. So when this happens, Revit knows that my owner has changed this information, but the other user has not seen those changes yet. So for that to take place, this user must synchronize with the central file. Again, checking any of the boxes located down here, and click OK. Once that takes place, the user has now relinquished all of the ownership of this content, but now this user can look at content where it says Model Updates, and it will indicate that this wall has a change applied to it that is not visible here because I've not downloaded any of the updated content from the server. So this is a good practice to understand where content has been changed, but you are not seeing the current updates at this time. I can then go to Synchronize with Central, Synchronize and Modify Settings, again upload any of my data, relinquishing content, but then also downloading data from the central file that other people have manipulated. So now when I click OK, it goes through that process of synchronizing with the central. I can now see the updated change that the other user has made, allowing me to continue to work with all the updated information as correctly as possible. That process will continue to run seamlessly throughout the lifetime of the project. A few other options that are helpful to understand is when I go to the Collaborate tab, Synchronize panel. A few other options that you do have are to relinquish all mine, reload latest, and with the drop-down list choose Synchronize now. These options are available, but again, I still recommend that you would use the Synchronize and Modify settings. Synchronize now will upload any of your content to the central file, but not download any of the content from other users. And it also does not relinquish any of the content that you own. Reload latest will download any of the content from the central file that other members have uploaded that you do not have just yet. Relinquish all mine will release any of the content that you own, but also not upload content to the central file and not download any content from the central file. So again, I highly recommend that you use the Synchronize and Modify Settings option, checking all these boxes when available, so that all of those processes are satisfied at the same time. It's a much better practice for the whole team to use this dialog box so that everyone is continuously synchronizing their content and seeing the benefit of letting go of their information regularly so that other members can use the content without issue. Another option under the Collaborate tab, Synchronize panel, is to turn on Work Share Monitoring. This is a tool that allows you to visualize the content from the central files that you are accessing and see where other users are accessing the file as well. Clicking on that will open a dialog box showing you any of the users that are currently working in the project, whether they're synchronizing currently, and what information is available within that central model file. This is a good practice to turn on this information. Also, importantly to understand is only one user can synchronize to the central file at any time. So if there's already a user synchronizing to the central file, their process must finish before you or the next person can synchronize as well. And Revit will take that as a first come, first served basis. The next person in line will synchronize after that, and then the following, and so on. So you can see in this list who is actively working in the central file connection and who is synchronizing as well. We'll keep that information up to date at all times. As you may be using links in your Revit software, I would recommend creating a work set specifically for Revit and AutoCAD links. This is another good process to separate the content from the rest of the information in your project and gives you the ability to turn that information on and off in specific views. And then selecting any links that you want to manipulate, placing them on that work. Looking at this floor plan, we will create a group environment, utilizing that group over and over again across multiple office spaces. I have this office laid out as a 19-foot 6 by 10 foot, and the consistency of the spaces to be 10 foot deep in each location will make the group creation very helpful. The consistency of objects when creating groups is very encouraged. It's a best use of the groups, but if they're not, there are ways to mitigate that and work around it. All of the objects in this room I will select as far as the furniture, go up to the Modify tab, Create Panel, and select this option that says Create Group. I'll give it a name, call it Office Area 1, click OK. So notice when I click on the elements of that group, it now shows up where all of the objects are selected at once, and it has a dashed blue line around that location. The groups in Revit work kind of like a block in AutoCAD, where all of the elements are joined together as a single object and can be shifted around and manipulated, keeping all of those objects together. I will now copy and multiply those into each room space, and then we'll utilize how groups are best used in a project. Now each of these spaces are designed with a single group in each one, and all of the rooms are not exactly the same size or orientation, but this would be very useful to allow us to redesign information or adjust information inside of this space quickly. Selecting this object and choose from the Modify tab, Group Panel, you have Edit Group, Ungroup, and Link. Choose Edit Group, and these are the pieces of information inside of this group. Notice that I accidentally forgot to include the wastebasket, which is not part of all of the other spaces, but that's okay, we can add it later. Going to the Edit Group tab that opened up as a flyout panel, choose Add, and now select this waste paper basket and click Finish, and notice what happens to all of the other existing groups. They now have received that waste paper basket into each one. So you can always make adjustments after the group has been created. Select the group again and choose Edit Group. Now I want to make some modifications. Maybe I want to move this bookcase to be aligned to both sides of the desk evenly. Maybe at this time I want to move this file cabinet to the other side. Maybe I even want to include a duplicate copy of that file cabinet over here. And oh well, I decided that we want to adjust the sofa to now be against this wall. With that design change, it would take a lot more time to redefine all of these spaces with that same design choice. But now that we have created all of these spaces to utilize a group, it makes it so much easier. When I click the green check mark to finish now, notice that all of those spaces have been redesigned with that same adjustment. They are not all going to fit within that redesign, but that could be worked with. Now I will select one of those grouped elements and choose Edit Group once more. Maybe I don't want to include a second file cabinet in every room space, so I'm going to remove it from this group. Choose Remove, select that select that file cabinet. Notice that it grays out. Click the green check mark, and it's still there, but it's no longer part of the group. I can now select that object and move it around wherever I want that to be. I can move it over here to the other side of the room and readjust it. I can move it to a different location in the space according to how it makes sense. And in this room, that file cabinet there didn't make sense anyway. We'll look at this one in a moment. So as you work around, you can see where that information does and doesn't need to continue, but it keeps a copy of that object within each grouped space that already existed, giving you the ability to copy that object into multiple groups at the same time, but then have the ability to manipulate it outside of the group later. Selecting one of the groups, look at the Properties panel and you see where it says Model Group Office Area 1 with a drop-down list is currently the only option. Choose Edit Type, and then I will duplicate this type to say Office Area 2 and click OK. That's the only modification I will make. You can actually add information in here if you wish, for manufacturing information if you want to, but that's all included in the furniture and other elements inside of each group. Click OK. Now selecting this object, it says Office Area 2 is the name of that type. Choose the group again, choose Edit Group. Now I'm going to make some modifications. Maybe in this space we want to remove the sofa and select this office and make a desk and chair, making this a double desk. So as I zoom out and I click the green checkbox to finish, notice that that office is the only one that changed. None of the others have been adjusted because this one is a different name because it's a different type. You can create as many duplicate types of a group as you want to with different modifications. So now that I select this office, I have a drop-down list with 2 choices. That also means that I can click into another existing group and change that to Office 2, and it changes the design, giving you the ability to have multiple design choices within each group type. That way you can have different room types for different purposes or different layouts. You can have a whole catalog of different room layouts, using those over and over again. And when you click on a group, you can have a list of all of those different room types from that same group condition. Clicking on the group again, another option is to ungroup. You only want to use the ungroup option when you want to make sure that the objects are all independent and can be controlled separately now, because this is not able to be turned back into the same group as it was before, giving me the ability to move and adjust everything from that group as individual objects. So it's basically exploding a block or breaking the group apart, and it cannot be turned back into the same group later. Another option is to select this object, go to the Modify tab, Group panel, and choose Link. It says Convert Group to a linked model, and the options are to replace with a new project file or replace with an existing project file. Existing project file is if you already have an outside resource that you want to load in as a link. Replace with new project means I'm going to use the information from this group and create a separate RVT Revit file. I'm going to use replace with new project, click OK, and this creates a whole separate Revit model file, including only the layout for this office. The difference with this is it now creates it as a linked element instead of a group. Notice when I click on this, it says Modify Revit Link. The properties say that it's a linked file, and you no longer have the ability to control elements of the linked file as you would with a normal group. However, this gives you the ability to separate the work process of anyone that can lay out the design of the building or the layout of the room spaces, and someone to control or lay out the design of the furniture and equipment or components inside of the space. So you can separate that labor of work. And you can open this RVT Revit file separately as another user, and that model will only include all of the information from that room. You can see that in a 3-dimensional view. And any adjustments that are made will show up in the design once you reload that link. This gives a company the ability to have a designer or colleague or consultant working on the layout of the room spaces in the information of the furniture and components inside of that room outside of their network. All they need is the appropriate space information, such as the size of the room that they are using. And within this linked file, you don't want to include things like walls, because that is part of the main Revit model, but you can include things like reference planes, as drafting boundaries, and you can be told that the size of the space is an approximate 10 by 20, and as long as they stay within that envelope, it will fit in your space. And then when you save that file, go back into your project, and then load that linked file back into your model, it will include any changes that are made. That way, members of the team can be working off-site or remotely outside of the normal network environment that would be required if you're using Revit Collaboration, or if they're not using the BIM 360 environment collaborating in the same file, giving you a little more freedom. The groups can be utilized across multiple models, across multiple levels of the building. If this was a 10-story building and all of the office spaces were approximately the same size on each floor, you could use this same group layout over and over again, and it would change the design of each group as things are modified. This is a very useful tool, especially for spaces that have consistent layout designs, such as schools, office buildings, hospitals, anything that would be a very consistent layout over and over again. This will help save time by not having to redesign elements over and over again. Coming back into this environment where these elements are overlapping, as you hover over an object of the group, you can hit the Tab key and select that object separately, and then you see this little icon that says Group Member. Click icon to exclude in this group instance. Select that, deselect the whole group, and the object has been removed or disappears. Continue that over and over again. You are not deleting the object from the group, you're just removing that object from this instance of the group. So this gives you the ability to have that layout, say, serve multiple purposes. In this space, maybe it's just more of a meeting or a group area, and you don't need the desks in there anyway, but the layout of the space makes a lot of sense to just leave it there. You can utilize that over and over again. Maybe in this office, you don't want a desk, but you still want the chair facing the wall. Not that you would do that, but again, those are options that you have at all times. As you select the group, those hidden elements will still show up, and if you make modifications to the group, they will still adjust that group as well. That object is just turned off in that group location and will not be included in counts for the furniture or for components, so they will not show up in the schedule and can be counted appropriately if you are excluding those from that space. You can have as many groups into the project as you want with as many different group types, and each one can be utilized over and over again from the properties drop-down list. In this drawing, we will now look at design options. In this side of the building, notice how the wall is broken at this point and continues down here through the rest of the building. This area above has been laid out with a certain amount of information and comes over here, and the line of the wall is broken here as well. Once we've designed this, maybe we've decided that we want to have multiple choices or different design options for ourselves or the client to choose from. You can go to the Manage tab, Design Options panel, and choose Design Options, opening up this dialog box. There's already one design option turned on, and I'll collapse this for right now and create another option set. In the right side, go to Option Set and choose New, which creates Option Set 1, Option 1 Primary. The Option Set is a category or folder where multiple design areas can be established, and you can have multiple options underneath each option set. Choosing Option Set 1, I can rename that to something different, calling that Back of House. Click OK, changes that name, moves it up in alphabetical order, and I have Option 1 listed here. I'm going to click Close for the moment, and currently there is nothing in that design option, but I want to redefine some of the information back here. To do that, I actually need to remove the area of information that already exists. One way to do that is actually to push this content that I've already created into a design option. Once you have have created content in the Revit software, to move the content into a design option, it's a little frustrating. You cannot just move it by any command or something like that. But what you could do is use a copy paste option. So I'm actually going to select all the content that I intend to shift around or move to a design option. Then go to the Modify tab, Clipboard panel, and choose Cut to Clipboard, which will delete everything that you had to select, but it puts it on your clipboard. You can paste it later. We will now move into the design option that we've just created by going back to Design Option, choosing Back of House. Option 1 is selected, and then choose under Edit, Edit Select. This bolds Option 1, Primary, and makes content of Option 1 active. Design options are unique where they are almost a separate model environment, but you can create as many of them in the model as you want, but they are not part of the main model area. You have to work on them separately and individually. Now that I have Option 1 active, I will close this design option, and then notice that I cannot select any of the physical model content in this view. It does not let you work with elements that are not in this design option itself. But I'm going to move that content I just put on my clipboard into this space by going back to the Modify tab, Clipboard panel, choose Paste from a drop-down list, and then choose Paste Align to Current View. It will paste it at the exact same location from the view it was located. And now that I'm in the design option, it is pasted in the design option area. So now all of the content shown here is part of that design option number 1. Going back to the Manage tab, design option area, and it says design option is still primary. To continue after you've made any edits to design option, you have to say finish editing. That will turn the design option off and enable the main model once more. Before continuing, I'll actually close this and notice that when I select all the content in the view now, the content of the main model is now content from the design option is not selected. So you have to be in one set or the other, either the main model or an option set. Going back to the design option panel, under back of house, selecting option 1, I'm going to choose to duplicate this option, which makes option 1 parentheses, I'll rename that to option 1B. The original is still there. I'm just making a design option 1B choice. After creating this and labeling option 1B, choose close. And now I have a duplicate version. Selecting option 1B and choose edit selected to make it active, click close. Now I have a duplicate copy of the content that I just brought into the design option of the original choice of the design. I now have the ability to make changes that will be another option to choose from, and they'll both be saved for future reference. And these changes can be as big as you want. I can simply select this door, flip the swing, and move it down, and that is a complete change in the design. It's minimal, but it's a different choice. And I can actually go to the design option drop-down list here, and I can see all of the design options available. 1B is active currently. I can also switch to option 1 and notice that the door moved back. And I can easily switch back and forth between 1B and number 1 at any time. Both of them are still intact and available. Whichever one you select from the drop-down list becomes active by default, and then any content you create will be available or placed inside of that design option. So for instance, if I draw walls over here, these walls are now part of option 1B set. If I go to option 1, those walls disappear. So they only exist in this design option currently. Selecting all the content from this area, I will actually rotate the entire wing of this building out 35 degrees. So you've absolutely changed the design of the building, but you can create as many of these different designs as you want. I can even take this wall and say, well, I want that to be rectilinear now, and I'm going to create a new version of it that comes down this way over and then meets back at this wall. When you're working with design options, the walls will have a hard time cleaning up because they are in different environments. As a design option, it's not exactly part of the main model, and there's actually another wall that comes through here in another option set, and Revit knows that and it can still see it, so it does get confused. So while the design options are part of your model, the content will look a little funny and not clean up correctly at the connection points. Same thing over here. There are different ways that you can work around that. If you don't care, it's fine. A lot of people do care what it looks like, and you're kind of stuck until that becomes completely part of the main model. But now that I have this new choice, I can make further design changes. mirror this wall area to the other side, mirror this wall area, leaving a copy to the other side, and you can continue to refine and redesign as needed, giving you a larger space in here to implement new areas. And once again, this all becomes part of that design. Go back to the Manage tab, Design Options, switch back to Option 1. That one returns. Switch to Option 1B, and that was created there. I can also go back to Design Options. Switching into Back of House, you have to choose Finish Editing first to get out of that option. Choosing Back of House, I'll now choose New option down at the bottom, which creates a separate option which is blank. It doesn't duplicate the existing one, it creates a brand new area that's blank. So clicking option 2 and choose Edit Selected, making that one active. Notice that all of the content in the background has disappeared, but that gives me a blank canvas to add any content that I wish. Maybe we now want to have a curved area in the back. And then design walls and other office spaces around that curvature. The design options are also three-dimensional. Again, they are a completely designed building. As much information as you put in the design option will be available in that project. You can create a design option that is simply as different as a door swing or as expansive as an entire wing or multiple stories of a building. The options are limitless, but the amount of information that is included within each design option is stored in the project model and will impact the size of the project file. So while the design options are in the model, they will be taking up memory space, and at some point it will be helpful to decide which design option to go with forward, and then you can apply that into the model for permanent future design, because as it's part of the design option, it makes it much more uncomfortable to work with. And then when you decide to go with a design option, go back to the design option window. Whichever option is set to be primary will be chosen when you add it to your project as part of the main model. So for instance, if I select option 1B, I have to choose Finish Editing first. You always have to select Finish Editing before you can do anything. Choosing option 1B, notice how option 1 says primary. Choosing option 1B, I can choose Make Primary, and then it moves 1B to become the primary option, which will be the default view in every view showing that spec. With each option displayed, you can also go to different views, and using visibility graphics, you can set choices for which design option is displayed within that view. Going to level 1, I have another duplicate view here. So I'm going to right click on that view and rename it option level 1, option 1B. Right click and duplicate that view again, and label it option 2. Go into visibility graphics. When you are implementing design options, you have a new tab in the in the visibility graphics window called design options. Clicking the design options tab, you have each design option set available and the design options to choose from. You can specify which design option and design option set are displayed within this view. Clicking Back of House with a drop-down list, I'm going to choose option 2, hit apply, and notice how that design option becomes visible. So regardless of which design option is active, this option will always be displayed in this view because you've set it under the visibility graphics. When it's set to automatic, whichever one is active becomes the default setting. And when it's set to primary, whichever the primary option is also displayed by default. But you can choose which option is displayed in each view separately. And then, for instance, under conference room areas, I have multiple choices down here as well in this area. So I have primary, which is displayed, option 2, which is a different set, option 3 is another set. So you can create multiple views here. Under option 1B, I can adjust that one to be conference room 2, option 1B, level 1, and the active design option to be option 1, and each view has a different display set for it, giving you the ability to add these views to multiple sheets for presentation for the choices that are being decided on between your client or meetings that you're having with your team or your other colleagues. Everyone can weigh in on which choice is best or which changes to make further or to move on with and to develop that option more. Once you have chosen the final design, going back into design options, whichever one is set to be primary, finish editing. Whichever one is set to be primary, choose the main options set area, which is the main heading, where it says back of house currently, where it says on the right hand side, except primary. That means it will remove the design option set and all of the sub options from the project, and then move the option that you've chosen as primary into the main model area. It will also again delete all of these sub options. Before taking this step, I highly recommend that you make a backup copy of the project as it is right now, so that you don't lose any of those options for the future, because later down the road your clients or some other member of the team might say, hey, we want to go back and look at this choice again, and if it's not there or if it's been deleted, then you're stuck. So once you've set option 1B to be primary, choosing back of house, choose accept primary, and it'll give you a warning, again reminding you of this choice, saying that if you accept primary, it will delete all sub options and also delete any secondary views that were created for it, which are the ones over here. If I click accept, it's going to remind me which views will be deleted, the one for option 2. Click OK. It removes that option set completely from the project and then pushes the content from that design option into the main model area, and it's no longer available to switch back and forth between the different designs. I still have conference room options in here because that is still a separate option set to deal with. You can have as many option sets and as many options in each subgroup. You can delete options. You can also delete design sets without accepting them into the main model. Again, make sure you're using the right choices here, because you could make a very big change that could affect a lot of people if you accidentally delete something. So between using groups, which can also be implemented into design options, and design options themselves, you can create an unlimited amount of choices within the Revit software. Different from an older AutoCAD method that you might have used where you have multiple copies of the same floor plan side by side, each one of those with a different design setting for it. In Revit, because you can't easily copy all of the content side by side without duplicating the quantity of content, this design option is a much easier and better, I feel, option to move forward with different choices throughout the schematic design and design development phases of the project. Check out our previous videos below. Comment below and tell us more information you'd like to see covered in the Revit software.